Wanting you back is not proof of change. It's often proof of discomfort, loneliness, or loss of control. And I need you to hold on to that with both hands, because your heart will try to make their return feel like redemption. Your heart will say, finally, they get it. Finally, they see me. Finally, they realized what they lost. And I'm not here to shame that hope. I'm here to protect you from the kind of hope that reopens the same wound. Because a dismissive avoidant can want you back for reasons that have nothing to do with being ready to love you well. They can miss the way you made their life easier. They can miss the way you calmed them down. They can miss the way you gave and didn't demand much because you were trying to be understanding. They can miss the certainty of having you in their pocket, the comfort of knowing you were there, even when they were distant. And when that comfort disappears, their nervous system doesn't call it, I miss them. It calls it discomfort. It calls it emptiness. It calls it restlessness. It calls it, something feels off. So they reach out. Not always because they're healed. Sometimes because they're unsettled. Sometimes because they're lonely. Sometimes because the silence that used to feel like freedom suddenly feels like a void. And you need to understand the difference, because if you confuse discomfort with growth, you will mistake a message for a transformation, and you will put your heart back in the same place that taught it to brace. Loneliness is loud. Loneliness makes people romantic. Loneliness makes people remember only the good parts. Loneliness makes people reach for what's familiar, even if what's familiar was unhealthy. So when they're alone on a weekend, when they're stressed, when they're bored, when their distractions don't work anymore, they can suddenly realize your worth. But realizing your worth in a lonely moment is not the same thing as respecting your heart in a committed season. And then there's loss of control, and this one is brutal, because it doesn't look like control at first. It looks like love. When you stop chasing, when you stop explaining, when you stop being available on demand, something happens. The dynamic shifts. The person who used to pull away and still keep you begins to feel powerless because the old lever doesn't work anymore. Their silence doesn't pull you back. Their distance doesn't trigger your panic the same way. Their hot and cold doesn't control the temperature of your self-esteem anymore. And that loss of control can feel like an ego injury. It can feel like rejection. It can feel like they're suddenly the one being left behind. So they reach out. Not because they've changed. Sometimes because they can't stand not being chosen. Sometimes because they can't stand not being the one who decides when the connection happens. Sometimes because your boundary makes them face a reality they've avoided. That access to you is not a guarantee anymore. And if you're a loving person, you'll feel this pull to soften, because you'll think, maybe this is the breakthrough. Maybe this is the moment their ego breaks and their heart opens. But an ego break can produce emotion without producing maturity. Someone can feel shaken and still not be safe. Someone can feel regret and still repeat the pattern. Someone can cry and still disappear the next time things get real. This is why wanting you back is not the metric. The metric is what they do differently when they have you again. Because anyone can be sweet when they're afraid. Anyone can be consistent for a week when they want access. Anyone can say, I miss you, when they feel empty. The question is, can they show up when they're triggered? Can they communicate when they want to shut down? Can they take accountability without flipping it on you? Can they respect your boundaries without trying to negotiate them when it's inconvenient? Can they treat your feelings like they matter, even when those feelings make them uncomfortable? That's the difference between discomfort and change. Discomfort reaches out to soothe itself. Change reaches out to repair what it broke, and you can tell which one it is by how they respond to your standards. If you say calmly, I need consistency. I need communication. I need respect. And they get defensive. If they accuse you of being too much, if they rush you, if they guilt you, if they try to make you feel responsible for their feelings, that is not change. That is the same old pattern trying to regain control. Real change sounds different. Real change says, "You're right." Real change says, "Here's what I did." Real change says, "Here's what I'm doing now." Real change doesn't demand trust, it earns it. Real change doesn't pressure you to move fast, it respects your pace. Real change doesn't ask for instant access, it accepts that access is rebuilt through time. And here's what I want you to admit, because it's the part your heart keeps hiding. You don't want them back if they're the same. You want the fantasy back. You want the version of them you glimpsed on good days. You want the softness you saw when their guard dropped. You want the closeness that felt possible, the potential that kept you hoping. But the fantasy is not what you lived with day to day. Day to day, you lived with inconsistency, distance, confusion, and emotional labor that left you exhausted. So when they come back, don't ask, "Do they want me?" Ask, "Are they capable of keeping me safely?" Don't ask, "Do they miss me?" Ask, "Do they respect me?" Don't ask, "Are they emotional right now?" Ask, "Are they different over time?" Because your heart is not an experiment, and you are not going to keep offering your tenderness as proof that you're lovable. You already are. And the moment you accept that, you stop being hypnotized by a return. You stop being impressed by words. You stop being moved by guilt. You stop being pulled by nostalgia. You start listening to what your body needs: steadiness, clarity, safety, respect. You start honoring the part of you that got tired of waiting, the part of you that got tired of being the strong one, the part of you that is done calling anxiety love. So if they want you back, let that be the beginning of scrutiny, not surrender. Let that be the moment you slow down, not speed up. Let that be the moment you protect your future self, not rescue their loneliness. Because if it's real change, it will still be there tomorrow. It will still be there next week. It will still be there after the excitement fades. It will still be there when accountability is required. It will still be there when consistency is boring. It will still be there when love becomes a practice instead of a feeling. Brutal questions protect your heart because they force clarity, accountability, and consistency, not charm and nostalgia. And you need that protection the moment a dismissive avoidant says they want you back, because your heart will try to sprint ahead. Your heart will remember the good moments. Your heart will remember the warmth. Your heart will remember the version of them that showed up just enough to keep you hoping. And hope can be beautiful. But hope without clarity is how you end up back inside the same cycle, the same confusion, the same silence, the same ache you promised yourself you'd never tolerate again. So listen, these questions are not about punishing them. They are about saving you. They are not about winning. They are about truth. They are not about making them feel small. They are about making the reality impossible to hide behind. Because avoidant patterns thrive in the gray zone. They thrive in vagueness, in "I don't know," in "maybe," in "let's see," in "I'm trying," in "you're overthinking." They thrive in charm that temporarily softens you, then disappears the moment you ask for something real. And brutal questions turn the lights on in that gray zone. You ask brutal questions because you're done falling in love with potential. You're done being moved by emotion without evidence. You're done mistaking intensity for safety. You're done accepting apologies that don't come with change. You're done being the one who carries the emotional weight while they carry the escape plan. Brutal questions are how you stop giving access to someone's words and start requiring access through behavior. And here's the thing. If they truly changed, questions won't scare them. If they truly did the work, questions won't offend them. If they truly respect you, questions won't feel like an attack. They'll feel like the natural consequence of what you went through. The only people who fear accountability are the people who plan to keep a back door open. The only people who call your questions too much are the people who benefited from you not asking them before. Because when you ask, "What exactly did you do, and what do you understand about how it impacted me?" you're not asking for poetry, you're asking for awareness. Specificity is protection. Specificity proves they can see reality without rewriting it. If they can't name what they did, they will repeat it. If they can't name your pain, they will dismiss it again. If they can't hold the truth without blaming you, then they're not coming back to build love. They're coming back to soothe themselves. And when you ask, "What have you done to change?" not "What do you plan to do?" you're separating intention from effort. Plans are easy. Promises are easy. Feelings are easy. Change is hard, and real change leaves footprints. New communication habits, consistent check-ins, learning to stay present in discomfort, therapy, coaching, journaling, reading, practicing. You're not asking them to be perfect. You're asking them to be responsible. Because love without responsibility becomes chaos, and you've had enough chaos. Brutal questions also protect you from the most dangerous trap, the restart. The restart is when they come back sweet, apologetic, emotional, and you reset everything because your heart is relieved. You forget the pattern because the warmth feels like safety. But warmth is not safety if it disappears the moment you need something. So your questions stop the restart. They slow it down. They create a pause where your nervous system can breathe and your standards can speak. And you have to ask about the future, not just the past. What will you do the next time you feel triggered and want to shut down? Because you're not here to repeat the same script. The past is the proof of what they do under stress. If the answer is vague, "I'll try," "I'll be better," "I don't know," then you have your answer. Vague answers are warning signs. Healthy answers are practical. "I will tell you when I'm overwhelmed. I will ask for space with a time frame. I will not disappear. I will come back and talk. I will not punish you with silence." That's not romance. That's maturity. And maturity is what keeps love alive. Then you ask about consistency. Are you willing to show up on ordinary days? Because avoidants can be intense when they're afraid of losing you. They can be passionate when the relationship feels like it's slipping. They can become the perfect person for 2 weeks. Then the old pattern returns the moment the danger passes. So you need to know, can they love you when it's calm, when it's steady, when it's not dramatic, when there's no adrenaline? Because real love is built on boring consistency, not emotional fireworks. And you ask about boundaries. What boundaries of mine will you respect without negotiating? Because this is where your heart gets protected. If they return and immediately push your line, you'll know they're not back to honor you. They're back to regain access. A safe person doesn't argue with your boundary. They respect it. A safe person doesn't call your needs pressure. They call your needs information. A safe person doesn't punish you for asking. They adjust because they care. But here's the most important part. Brutal questions only work if you are willing to accept the answers, not the words, the reality. If they get defensive, if they blame you, if they mock the questions, if they rush you, if they guilt you, if they try to flip it into, "Why are you doing this to me?" That's not love returning. That's control trying to re-enter. Your questions are a filter, and a filter is useless if you drink whatever comes through anyway. So ask the questions, and then watch the behavior. Don't get hypnotized by a great conversation. Don't get moved by tears alone. Tears can be real and still not equal change. Guilt can be real and still not equal safety. Missing you can be real and still not equal consistency. You need time. You need patterns. You need proof that lasts beyond the moment. And here is the part that will touch your heart. You ask brutal questions because you love yourself now. You ask them because you remember what it felt like to sit in confusion. You remember what it felt like to beg for basic clarity. You remember what it felt like to feel alone while still attached. You remember the nights your chest was tight, the mornings you woke up anxious, the way your mind never rested. Those memories are not there to torture you. They're there to protect you. They're there to make sure you don't hand your healing back to the same dynamic. So when they say they want you back, you don't collapse. You don't rush. You don't surrender your standards for the relief of being wanted. You ask what protects you, and you hold your boundary like your future depends on it, because it does. And you stay steady enough to choose the answer that brings you peace, not the answer that brings you temporary comfort. Ego breaks when access ends, and access only returns when behavior proves safety over time, not because you're trying to teach them a lesson, but because you're finally telling the truth with your actions. For so long, your love was available even when their effort was not. Your presence was guaranteed even when their respect was inconsistent. Your forgiveness was automatic even when repair never happened. And when someone gets used to that, they stop treating you like a person with limits. They start treating you like a resource they can reach for whenever they feel like it. So when you end access, something shifts in them. Not always, because they suddenly became emotionally mature. Sometimes because the dynamic that fed their ego has changed. Their ego was comfortable when you were chasing, when you were explaining, when you were staying soft while they stayed distant. Their ego was comfortable because it never had to face the reality that you could actually leave, that you could actually stop, that you could actually choose yourself without begging for permission. Access is power, and in an avoidant dynamic, the person who controls access often controls the emotional temperature. They disappear, you panic, they return, you exhale. They pull away, you overthink. They give a crumb, you soften. That push and pull keeps you emotionally focused on them, and it keeps them feeling in control, even if they would never admit that. So when you stop participating, when you stop chasing, when you stop responding to crumbs, the ego feels threatened because the old liver no longer works. That's what an ego break really looks like. It's not always tears. It's not always a dramatic confession. Sometimes it's irritation. Sometimes it's confusion. Sometimes it's sudden sweetness. Sometimes it's, "Why are you acting like this?" As if your self-respect is an attack. Because the moment you end access, they have to face a painful truth. You were not staying because the relationship was healthy. You were staying because you were loyal. And loyalty is not infinite when it keeps getting disrespected. And I need you to understand something important. Their ego break is not your responsibility to manage. You don't chase them through it. You don't comfort them through it. You don't soften your standards to make it easier for them to adjust. Because if you do, the ego doesn't break. It gets reinforced. It learns. All I have to do is feel uncomfortable, and they'll come back and fix it. That's not healing. That's the cycle resetting with a new costume. So access ends, and for the first time, they sit with themselves. They sit with silence without you filling it. They sit with consequences without you rescuing them. They sit with the loss of your warmth, your attention, your emotional labor, and that's when reality gets loud. Because the thing they avoided wasn't only intimacy, it was also accountability. And accountability feels like exposure to someone who survived by staying emotionally untouchable. But listen carefully. An ego break is not the same as transformation. Someone can feel shaken and still not be safe. Someone can feel lonely and still not be consistent. Someone can want you back and still plan to return to the same disappearing act once they feel secure again. That's why access only returns when behavior proves safety over time, because time is the only thing that exposes whether this is growth or panic. Safety is not a speech. Safety is not, "I miss you." Safety is not, "I changed." Safety is what they do when they're triggered. Safety is what they do when they're stressed. Safety is what they do when they feel overwhelmed and their instinct is to shut down. Do they communicate or do they vanish? Do they take a pause with clarity or do they punish you with silence? Do they return and repair or do they return and pretend nothing happened? A safe person says, "I'm getting overwhelmed. I need space. I'm going to take the evening. I'll call tomorrow at 7, and I will follow through." A safe person says, "I hear you. I'm sorry. I understand why it hurt. And here is what I'm doing differently." A safe person can handle your feelings without making you feel guilty for having them. A safe person doesn't make you chase basic communication like it's a privilege you haven't earned. So if they come back and your heart starts racing, slow down. Don't confuse urgency with destiny. Don't confuse intensity with safety. Don't confuse a moment of humility with a lifetime of change. You are not a rehab program for someone's emotional avoidance. You are not here to provide comfort while they figure out whether they can treat you well. Your heart is not a place where people experiment. Your heart is your home. And this is where your power becomes real. You let time do the talking. You don't rush back into full access. You don't hand them your body, your time, your emotional intimacy, your daily presence, just because they showed up with regret. Regret is a feeling. Safety is a pattern. So you watch for patterns. You watch how they respond to boundaries. You watch whether they respect your pace without pressure. You watch whether they keep showing up when there is no drama pushing them forward. Because the old pattern was this: they would come back when they missed you and disappear when you needed them. They would be warm when it benefited them and cold when it required effort. They would want closeness on their terms and call you too much when you asked for basic consistency. So the new standard has to be this: access is earned through repeated, calm, respectful behavior over time, not through one emotional conversation. And yes, that will feel uncomfortable because part of you wants relief. Part of you wants to believe them immediately because believing them means your anxiety stops for a moment. But you have to stop using relief as your compass. Relief is how the cycle hooks you. Relief is what makes you forget the pattern. Relief is what makes you reopen the door and call it love, even when your nervous system knows you're walking back into instability. So you choose a different compass. Self-respect. Self-respect says, you don't get to return to full access without proof. Self-respect says, you don't get to skip accountability and still receive my softness. Self-respect says, you don't get to be inconsistent and still keep me emotionally attached. And if they truly changed, they won't fight your standards. They will meet them. They won't rush you. They will reassure you. They won't guilt you. They will respect you. They won't demand trust. They will earn it. That's when you'll know the difference between an ego break and real growth, because ego break says, I want you back right now. And growth says, I'm willing to rebuild this the right way, at your pace, with consistency, with accountability, with respect. And you will feel it in your body, because for the first time, love won't feel like suspense. It will feel like safety that you don't have to beg, for your self-respect is the standard. If they can't answer with actions, you don't negotiate. You walk, and I need you to treat that like a promise to yourself, not like a line that sounds good in a speech. Because the hardest thing about a dismissive avoidant is not that they leave, it's that they return. They return with just enough emotion to reopen your hope. They return with just enough sweetness to quiet your pain. They return with just enough words to make you doubt your own decision. And if you don't have a standard that's stronger than your longing, you will keep reopening the same door and calling it love. Self-respect is the standard, because self-respect is the only thing that doesn't change based on their mood. Their feelings will fluctuate. Their closeness will come in waves. Their effort might show up when they're scared and disappear when they're comfortable. But your self-respect, that has to be steady. That has to be the one thing in the room that doesn't move, because if your standard moves every time they return, your heart will never feel safe. So what does it mean if they can't answer with actions? It means you stop being impressed by emotional speeches. You stop being hypnotized by regret. You stop letting nostalgia rewrite history. You stop letting an apology erase the pattern. Because words are easy for someone who wants access. Words are cheap for someone who is lonely. Words are effortless for someone who wants relief from their own discomfort. But action, consistent action, boring action, dependable action, that is what proves safety. Action looks like consistency over weeks and months, not intensity for 2 days. Action looks like communication when they're triggered, not silence when it matters most. Action looks like accountability without blaming you for reacting. Action looks like them respecting your boundary without trying to bargain with it. Action looks like them showing up on ordinary days, not just in crisis. And the reason you have to require action is because your heart has already paid the price of trusting words. You trusted words before. I'll try. I'll be better. I didn't mean it. I just need space. You're important to me. And then you watch the same distance return. You watch the same dismissiveness return. You watch the same confusion return. And every time it returned, you didn't just lose trust in them. You lost trust in yourself. You started wondering if you were overreacting. You started questioning your standards. You started thinking maybe you were asking for too much. That is what this dynamic does. It makes you doubt the truth your body already knows. So self-respect becomes your anchor. Self-respect says, I believe my experience. Self-respect says, I believe the pattern. Self-respect says, I will not keep giving chances to behavior that keeps hurting me. Self-respect says, I don't need you to agree with my boundary for it to be real. Self-respect says, I can love you and still leave. And this is where you have to understand something. Not negotiating is not cruelty. It's clarity. You've been negotiating your needs for too long. You negotiated your desire for consistency. You negotiated your need for communication. You negotiated your right to feel safe. You negotiated your feelings until they became whispers. You negotiated your boundaries until they became suggestions. And then you wondered why they didn't take you seriously. People take you as seriously as you take yourself. So not negotiating means you stop making your standards a discussion. You stop over-explaining. You stop defending your needs like they're a courtroom argument. You stop giving 10 examples, hoping one will finally make them understand. Because the truth is, a person who wants to understand you will not require a perfect presentation. They will listen. They will reflect. They will adjust. They will care that you're hurting. They will care that they contributed to it. A person who doesn't want to understand will keep moving the goalpost. They'll focus on your tone. They'll focus on your timing. They'll say, "That's not what I meant." They'll say, "You're misreading it." They'll say, "I'm just like this." They'll say, "You're too emotional." They will make your pain feel like a problem you created, because if they can make it your fault, they don't have to change. So you stop negotiating with someone who benefits from your confusion. You walk, and walking doesn't mean you slam doors. Walking doesn't mean you insult them. Walking doesn't mean you try to win the breakup. Walking means you remove access, calmly, cleanly, permanently. You don't argue with the pattern, you exit it. And yes, this will be emotional, because walking means you will feel the withdrawal. You will miss them. You will remember the good moments. You will wonder if you're making a mistake. You will feel the urge to check if they care. You will feel the temptation to soften the standard just to relieve the ache in your chest. But the ache is not proof you should go back. The ache is proof you attached to someone who was inconsistent. The ache is grief. The ache is your nervous system detoxing from the push and pull. The ache is your heart releasing a fantasy. So you treat yourself gently, but you don't negotiate your standard. Because if you negotiate it once, you teach yourself that your boundaries are temporary. If you negotiate it again, you teach them that your standards are flexible. And then the cycle returns, and you are back where you started. Waiting, overthinking, bracing, shrinking. So your self-respect has to be stronger than your craving. Your self-respect has to be stronger than their charm. Your self-respect has to be stronger than the temporary relief of being wanted. Because being wanted is not the same as being treated well. Being missed is not the same as being chosen. Being contacted is not the same as being valued. And here is the heart-touching part. You were not asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person. You were asking someone with avoidant defenses to provide secure love without doing the work. You were asking someone who shuts down to hold your feelings with care. You were asking someone who runs from intimacy to stay present when it matters. And maybe they couldn't, not because you weren't worthy, but because they weren't ready. But your life cannot pause for someone else to become ready. Your heart cannot keep bleeding while someone else learns how to handle it. So you choose yourself, not as a performance, as a practice. You choose standards that protect you. You choose peace that doesn't depend on their mood. You choose relationships where you don't have to beg for basics. And if they want you back, they don't get a yes because they feel something. They get a yes only when they prove something. And if they can't, you walk. Not because you stopped loving, but because you finally started respecting the love inside you enough to stop giving it away to someone who kept treating it like it was optional.